In this episode, I'm going to talk about a topic that pretty much every other geek-related pop culture website has already covered, but mine will be different. I swear! Stick around! Hello, fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Nostalgia Syndrome. My name is Rob, and in this episode, we're going to talk about toys that were based on R-rated movies. Yes, I know, that's a topic that has been played out to the hilt. Every geeky pop culture website has talked about it. Different pop culture and toy blogs have talked about it. Toy YouTube channels have talked about it. But the problem is, the way they talk about it is not right. They clutch their pearls and wag their fingers and say how horrible it was. The thing is, it wasn't horrible. It was awesome, and it makes complete sense. The thing is, we got to see these commercials on television for the movies. The actors themselves, like Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Norris, they were part of the pop culture landscape. I mean, they were famous, and we knew who they were even if we weren't allowed to watch their movies. So, what better way to get kids involved than with toys and cartoons? I see nothing wrong with it. In fact, there's some classic movies that I love, don't get me wrong, that they just slide through when they're not really family friendly at all. I mean, we're talking about big movies like Gremlins, Indiana Jones movies, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, Beetlejuice, even Star Wars itself. At times, it's not family friendly. I mean, in New Hope, a dude gets his arm chopped off. People are dying left and right. I mean, these are questions I have to field when having a 6-year-old watch it now for the first time. It's not fun to answer. But when we were kids, it didn't faze us. Things are just different in the 80s than they are now. I think kids have a different sense of empathy that we didn't have at the time. Possibly. Or maybe it was just me. But anyway, these movies, they're big, beloved. I love these movies, as you probably all do. But they're not very family friendly, but no one bats an eye that they got toys. So, this is a celebration of the R-rated toys that we played with as kids. So, let's go to number 1. And that is Chuck Norris's Karate Commandos. These brightly colored Karate Commandos were the total opposite of the movies that Chuck Norris was making at the time. Now, to be fair, Chuck Norris bounced back and forth between PG and R-rated fare. And the thing is, a lot of his kung fu flicks were PG, and his action flicks were R. Now, you could say that the Karate Commandos followed in the vein of the PG films, and not the Invasion USA or Missing in Action films. Those were R, these were PG. I mean, some of them were still R, but a lot of them were PG too. I mean, and later in his career, he did more kid-friendly films. And then, Walker, Texas Ranger, where he was some giant morality compass for everybody. But anyway, that's why I'm kicking off the list with him, because it goes either way, like I said. So I think he, out of a lot of the things on this list, he himself, not any of his movies get tagged in the title, it's just Chuck Norris, that he was a little bit more freer because he did have plenty of PG movies in his repertoire as well as R-rated. In the year that Karate Commandos came out, he actually had 2 films that were released that year. He had Delta Force, which was R-rated, and Firewalker, which was rated PG, and that was more of a comedy adventure romp. So, just as an example, in one year, the same year the cartoon was released, he had a movie of each rating out. So, I don't see anything wrong with Chuck Norris getting a toy line and a cartoon. Number 2 is the R-rated movie American Ninja. Yes, American Ninja actually had a toy line. It was made by Fleetwood in 1985. Now, there were 2 figures. They were like 6-inch, 5-inch figures with cloth of a ninja and of Joe, the American Ninja. And you also had a bunch of role-playing toys of swords and knives and shuriken and a whole bunch of different things. But they were delegated more towards your Kmart's, your Woolworths, so you didn't see them everywhere. Fleetwood was not a very big manufacturer of toys back in the day. So, yeah, you probably missed out on these toys, but still, an R-rated movie that had a toy line to it. Now, American Ninja is a great movie, and I know a ton of us grew up watching it, even though it was R-rated. Number 3 on the list is Blue Thunder. Now, Blue Thunder was a movie about a giant attack helicopter. It had a lot of political intrigue, a lot of action, and honestly, I've never seen the movie. I remember wanting to see it. I remember seeing the commercials, and then I remember Airwolf coming out, and to me, that just morphed into the same thing because it was an attack helicopter. Anyway, the toys that were released were from Multi-Toy Company, released in 1983. And you had a full-size helicopter with action figures that could go inside of it. It looked pretty awesome. You even had a helicopter that if you pulled the plastic thing, it would go flying up in the air. Based on an R-rated movie. Political intrigue and stuff. Even to a kid, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but the toys sound pretty neat. Number 4 is something that got Matchbox in a lot of hot water, and that is the talking Freddy Krueger doll. Now, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies were all rated R horror movies. There was no ands, ifs, or buts. But in the year that the talking Freddy doll came out, Freddy's Nightmares was on the airwaves. And that was a TV show that passed all the censors and was family friendly, I guess. It was on late at night. It was an anthology series that followed different little Twilight Zone-esque horror tales. But was it more based on the TV show than the movies? You can go either way, so it's not. There was a family friendly Freddy Krueger at that exact same time. So you could say it was based on the TV show and wasn't that big of a deal. Either way, there was a huge scuttlebutt over the doll, and there actually was a toy line coming out called Max FX that looked so awesome. And it got shelved because of the whole Freddy Krueger debacle. It's very sad because the Max FX toy line looked like it had such great potential. It looked like it was going to be so much fun. Anyway, what could have been. Now, number 5 appears on everybody's list of R-rated toys, and it's not fair. This is unfairly categorized in this list, and I'll tell you why. Police Academy. The first movie was R-rated. I think it came out in 1983. Yes, it was R-rated. Very much so. Nudity, sexual humor. It was that type of sexual romp film, that comedy that was taking over the world at that time period, like Porky's and all those. Now, every movie that came after was rated PG-13 and then into PG. So by the time the Police Academy toys came out in 1988, Police Academy was a PG-rated franchise. I remember watching all the movies on HBO. I loved them. They were funny. They were, family-friendly PG movies at that time period. So the Police Academy toys get unfairly lumped into this because just one of them, the first one, was rated R. But like I said, in 1988, Police Academy, 5 was out, and that was PG. And you had 4 movies or 3 movies before that that were all PG-13 and PG and PG and PG. Family friendly. If that's, like I said, unfairly gets put on this list, but I'm including it just because I'm fighting the man with this list, and I'm telling you how it really is. Number 6 on the list is The Sword and the Sorcerer. Yes, the fantasy movie with nudity and violence galore got its own toy line. Now, these toys were pretty nondescript. They were just small plastic figures. Not even figures, like little plastic army men that you got in little blister packs. Now, this could have been anything, but they featured the artwork from the VHS tape or movie poster on the packaging. The Sword and the Sorcerer name was attached to it. This is a toy based on an R-rated movie. Like I said, the toys could have been anything. There's nothing really super specific about them. I mean, you got dudes with swords, dudes with axes and weapons, and you got monsters. I mean, like I said, they're just little plastic army men type of dudes. Could have been anything. But we're including it on the list. It's an R-rated movie with a toy line. Number 7 on the list is Rambo. Made by Coleco in 1985, the Rambo toys and cartoon were awesome. Now, these toys and cartoon were loosely based on Rambo First Blood Part 2. You had him dressed in the same garb, bow and arrow, rocket launcher, M60. The characters from the movie were either good guys or his allies, and they invented a whole menagerie of different characters to go along with it. It was actually a very fun toy line and cartoon series that just used the R-rated movie to spring off from. Like I said, the name Rambo and Sylvester Stallone were actually part of the fabric of pop culture in the 80s. So why not appeal to kids with it? That doesn't mean they're going to see the movie and be scarred by all the bloodshed and everything. I mean, I wasn't. I loved the movies. But I mean, it makes complete sense that something this big on a global scale, I mean, everybody loved the Rambo movie, would get a cartoon and a toy line. It's a no-brainer, really. I mean, there is a couple things on this list that kind of involve some mental gymnastics, but Rambo makes complete sense. And it was awesome. I'd love to get some of those toys back into my collection nowadays. Now, number 8 is one that I said might involve a little bit more mental gymnastics, and that is the movie Commando. You had figures based on Arnold Schwarzenegger, 3 different sizes actually. You had a huge one, you had a littler one, and then you had your normal G.I. Joe size 3 3/4. Now, the 3 3/4, he got a whole rogues gallery of villains to fight that weren't in the movie at all. But Arnold Schwarzenegger just cuts a impression of a living action figure. So it makes sense that they would make an action figure of him. I mean, the movie, I don't know how popular it was at the time, but I don't think it was like a national sensation like Rambo to get people talking and get toys out on the shelves. But the man himself was a living action figure, so that makes sense. This is actually a toy I talked about in the past of toys I wish I had as a kid, because I remember seeing these in the store, but I didn't have enough money at the time. It was either that or a G.I. Joe figure, and I went with the G.I. Joe figure because it was what I collected at the time. But if I could find any one of the 3 sizes of him nowadays, I would definitely buy it. Number 9 on the list is another Arnold Schwarzenegger film, and that is Conan. Released by Remco in 1985, the Conan action figures were kind of nondescript, He-Man scaled and built action figures that Remco was kind of famous for at the time. It could have been any type of barbarian or warrior, really. I mean, but it had the Conan name attached to it. The characters that were in the toy line didn't really reflect anything that was in the films or anything else. They were just other muscle men for him to fight. I'm not looking at anything. I didn't do any research on this particularly, and I should have, so forgive me. But if memory serves me, this was the time period that Conan the Destroyer came out, which was more of a family-friendly Conan movie. It was nothing like Conan the Barbarian that came out a few years before it. It wasn't bloody. It was family friendly, had a lot more humor to it. So this could be based on that film more than the original. And something that Conan has that no one else on this list has, let me double check, that no one else on this list has is a literary following. The books written by Robert E. Howard, I mean, they were famous in their own right. I mean, they had a huge cult following, but they were famous works of literature. So it could have been based on the books. Who knows? I mean, either way, the books weren't very family friendly either, but it's something. It doesn't just mean it was based on the bloody, awesome, best movie ever made, Conan the Barbarian, but could have been based on one of the other iterations of it. Either way, Conan figures awesome no matter what. Number 10 on the list comes from a movie that was this close to getting slapped with an X rating, and that is Robocop. Again, one of the best movies ever made. But not kid-friendly in the slightest. But the whole notion of a robotic police officer is very kid-friendly. So it makes sense that they would try to leapfrog this into a kid type of franchise. It was released in 1988 by Kenner, which, let me add real quick, a lot of these toys came from Kenner, which I think were just trying their hardest for a movie property to be as successful as Star Wars was for them, that they just jumped on everything, even the R-rated films. They were just ravenous to get that foothold back again. But anyway, made by Kenner in 1988, I believe Robocop 1 was out, and number 2 came out in 1990, so we are still 2 years away from that. But that was R-rated as well, so again, this was R on top of R, close to being X, and it got a toy line and a cartoon, and was awesome. I mean, the toys were cool. They had cap firing action in the back. I mean, I had the Robocop where his head came off and it was just the Murphy head that you could put the helmet back on. Had an awesome gun. I mean, the thing is, the movie may not have been for kids, but the whole mythos of a robotic policeman speaks to kids in loud volumes. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, robots are awesome for kids no matter what, but a robot policeman? Super cool. Anyway, this was just a quick list of 10 toys that were based on R-rated movies, and they're awesome for it. There ain't no pearl clutching here, there ain't no finger wagging, there is no looking down at these. These were things that we grew up with, and they were awesome. I mean, who cares that they came from R-rated movies? That doesn't automatically mean the kid's going to see the movie if their parents don't want them to. It just means that there was something viable and something fresh and something neat enough for kids to enjoy in that property. And yeah, that's what makes it awesome. I mean, it doesn't matter that the movie was R. It just matters that kids had fun. And I think a lot of the lists that I've read and watched on YouTube, they forget that. They just want to capitalize on the shock of it. How dare they? No. It was awesome, and they had every right to do it, and we're all better people for it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this or any of the episodes, don't mean to do it like that, any of the episodes that YouTube is recommending down below, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you'll be notified whenever there's a new episode. So until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad and stay dorky.